Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to season 4. This is episode number 3, and we're joined today by Zachary from VOYU, that's short for Varangian Orthodox Youth. Zach's been a long-time friend of mine, actually, and I'm just going to get him to introduce himself and where he got the term Varangian. Where did the whole concept come from?
All right, good day. Yeah, I'm Zachary from Australia, Melbourne specifically. And so Varangian actually, so has to do with the Varangian Guard of the Byzantine Empire. We sort of came up with the idea of a youth group that is not just ethnocentric, because that's a bit of a problem that has been occurring in Western countries. I don't know that it's not as bad in America, but it's relatively bad in Australia. So we decided would have something that's both for English, especially. So some of the English exiles did end up joining with the Varangian Guard, that kind of thing, as in after the harrying of the North by the Normans and all of that. But also we wanted it to have representation of like Greek ideas, so obviously the pollination between the Varangians and the Byzantines occurred. There was even some between the Varangians and the Slavs. So that's the main idea. Also, I guess the Viking aesthetic we thought might be a bit catchy. Um, so that's
It
how we came
definitely
up
is.
with
It
that.
is. No, I like the idea. The whole thing really stood out. I went and I won't lie, I had to look up what a Varangian was, but when I read it, I was like, this is pretty cool, you know? Um, so how long have you guys been around?
So probably about 3 to 3.5 years formally. Uh, we'd been doing stuff before that without much of a title or anything like that, but we had been, uh, yeah, right about a year or half a year before like all the lockdowns and all that, we formed, and we sort of got a massive influx, sort of along with all of the Orthodox online communities as well during those times when people were looking for spiritual shelter. And so that's how we grew through that. So I guess God brought something good out of something bad. Yeah, we've been operating about 3 years.
So explain to me what's Rokor for those watching. What is the what diocese is it under and how does it function? How do you guys work with the church?
Okay, Rokor is the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. It's sort of formed from all the whites, as in the white Russians who left Russia, and by white Russian I mean as in the sort of political affiliation. Um, Basically, generally monarchists, although some of them were just anti-communist. So the communists being the Red Russians. And so when they lost the Civil War, a whole bunch of Russians left Russia because otherwise they were being persecuted for being Orthodox Christians. And so Rokor formed as a sort of community for those Christians who'd been expelled from Russia. Uh, Primarily, there's some big Rokor places in America and Australia, but I think it still exists in Western Europe as well. Our relationship to the church as VOYU, we are under Rokor, so we operate within those bounds, or we're beholden to hierarchy within Rokor, but we also are on really good terms with the Serbs, and historically that's been the case with the Rokor and the Serbs anyway. Um, I mean, the Serbs historically are the ones who recognized Rokor, I believe, out of all the other jurisdictions as being legitimate.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so we're bound to Rokor, but we operate within and with other dioceses as well, which is really effective, especially since I have personal ties to the Serbian community through my role as a church conductor within the Serbian community. And I know a lot of the priests there, so they've been pretty helpful in allowing us to do stuff within their churches as well.
I think that's very concise. We don't get so many get to talk to many people from Rockall, so it's great to have you here. Sky and Mary, are there many Rockall parishes in America?
I know there's quite a few, and I think there's a few like monasteries that are also under our Rokor, but I personally have only been to like two. I know I used to attend a Rokor parish when I was like from like the ages of like being a baby to like uh about 7 or 8 until I started going to the parish that or like the mission that popped up within my own hometown. And yeah, I also have some in-laws um who go to Rokor in some bigger cities. I have a friend who whose dad is a priest of a Rokor church in I think Seattle as well. So yeah, there's quite a few around.
They're not both from the same state though, right? It's
Uh,
different for you, Sky.
Yeah, so regarding my state, I mean, I can think of maybe like one or two Rokor churches in the area. Like one or I could think about maybe like two. Usually either down towards Miami or up north. I think those are the two main ones. I've been to Jordanville up in a Rokor monastery up there. So that's pretty much all the Rokor places I know. And I know they're pretty new. Rokor does an amazing job in I've met places that have done like they do an amazing job in like Japan and stuff like that, and a lot of those they do a great job in Asia and in the East. Rokor. So
Um, well, for us, I'm in Sydney. So Zach's from Melbourne. I'm from Sydney. In Sydney, most of the parishes are actually Russian Orthodox, which is distinct from Rokor, if I understand correctly. Um, what's the
Moscow
distinction?
Patriarchate.
Okay.
Yeah, the distinction with Rokor and Moscow Patriarchate is we're tied to Moscow Patriarchate after the 2007 reunion of Rokor with the Moscow Patriarchate, which ended up causing a lot of schisms and things, but probably not the place to get into that. But the Moscow Patriarch parishes would be directly underneath like the Patriarch of Moscow or his bishop who is in charge of it, whereas we would have our synod is in America, and so that American synod is in charge of us. Either way, within Australia, it sort of is a case where the Rokor or the Moscow Patriarch parishes are, I guess, under foreign bishops, let's say, or as in ultimately foreign synod or foreign patriarchate. Obviously, we have bishops here, so that would be Bishop George of Sydney and Australia for Rokor.
so I'm sorry, I just had a question regarding Rokor. If uh, Hadi doesn't mind me asking, I know
Sure,
that
go for
there's
it.
a massive. I know there's a big connection between. I'm not sure whether it was the Russian Orthodox Church or whether it was Rokor, like under the Moscow Patriarchate or Rokor. But I believe OCA, the Orthodox Church in America, gained their autocephaly from one of them back in like the 70s or something like that. And I'm not sure if you could like speak on because I know there were a lot of Russian Orthodox parishes and all that stuff, especially in Alaska, and all of those got transferred over to OCA. If you
Yeah,
could,
that's correct. OCA received its autocephaly from the Moscow Patriarchate.
okay, so it was the Moscow Patriarchate that gave it. Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yep.
Well, yeah, well, for you guys watching, I think we've gone into kind of the history of what Rokor is, where VOYU ties into that. Let's actually focus now on the practice, the spiritual life. So, what do you guys do with the youth? What's the aim? What kind of services do you have and events?
Yes, so our main focus with VOYU, we're looking primarily to do mission work, but foundational to mission work is having a solid spiritual grounding for someone to move into. So you can make as many converts as you want, let's say, but if they come in and there's nothing for them to do or to receive spiritual nourishment from, then there was no point in what you're doing. So we make sure that we sort of promote a lot of English liturgies. I personally attend as many as I can and sing so that they can go ahead and work. We also do services during the week. Basically, Vespers is a really easy one. It's only half an hour and it flies by. The interesting thing that we did with that, so with the lockdowns thing, you weren't allowed to go in the church building or anything, but you were allowed to go for a walk in the park. And so what we did was we did Vespers in the park as a bit of a workaround, and that sort of hung on. And I think Vespers in the park, to me, it's not in the church building. Obviously, the church building is probably the best place for worship, but there's a sense where like the whole creation is God's temple, and you see that in the Genesis creation account where it's just sort of describing it in a temple sort of way. And it also means for people who are less comfortable with, let's say, the formal church institution, it's not as much of a culture shock. Not that a culture shock has to be bad. I mean, the Slavic envoys to the Byzantine Empire had a culture shock, and then the whole culture converted eventually. But on an individual basis, it can sometimes be more helpful in these days to have something less formal. So we do Vespers in the park, both as an aesthetic exercise, also allowing people to get in, and then we say, let's have barbecue or something like that. Or during Lent, we might just have some tea. Now, the biggest one that I'm personally a fan of is the all-night vigils that we do. Now, to be correct, or to be exact, so some parishes will refer to their nighttime services all-night vigil, which is the combination of Vespers, Matins, and the hours. That's not quite what we do. That lasts about 2.5 hours to 3 hours generally. But we'll do from, let's say, every few months, every 6 months, perhaps. We'll find a priest to convince to do Vespers, Matins, hours, and divine liturgy, and not abbreviating any of them. So there's a lot of abbreviations in the services of the church at the moment, which generally come from the Niconian reforms, Patriarch Nikon, or from those times rather. And so we unabbreviate them. It's a bit like what the
an actual all-night vigil.
Yeah, an actual all-night vigil. And I find it's a very refreshing aesthetic practice that has spiritually benefited a lot of people. So not just trying to make new disciples, let's say, but also providing in whatever ways we're able for spiritual nourishment that perhaps people can't normally get. So you can't normally get an all-night vigil at a parish setting, at a monastery, sure. And they do it on Mount Athos especially all the time. But not many people would have been exposed to praying for that length of time. And obviously it's difficult to pray truly that whole length of time, but it's almost like if you're there for 8 hours and you pray truly for like 5 minutes of that, that's better than like not praying truly at all in like a normal service. I don't know. So that's the main things we do. We also host like Q&As and things like that for people who are looking into Orthodoxy, and we just reach out to people whenever we can.
What's the age range of this youth group?
It's a bit nebulous, but I'd say probably somewhere between 16 and 30-ish to 35, even potentially. We haven't actually officially put an age range on, because I mean, the general vibe, let's say, of it is younger blokes. I mean, women are welcome as well, of course, but it is a bit of a boys' club in a sense, which is perhaps a bit unfortunate. But so basically, it feels like 18 to 24, but we are open to like 16 to 35 in a sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had a youth group growing up. It was interesting because around my area, we had like 3 sort of youth groups. So there's one focused on like the real young kids from like 6 to like 12. And they learned a lot of theology that way. And then the OG youth groups that I grew up like, and I was like one of the first members of, was like from 13 to 19. And then the one I'm part of now is called the Fellowship of the Cross, run by Father Paul Yaroslav here, and Deacon Joseph Frangipani, who's actually, who we've had on the podcast before. And it ranges from like 18 and up. So like lots of young adults from like all across America. Some we've had like from like Serbia will join, or it was Romania. I'm not sure which, but we'll have it over Zoom. So yeah, when we'll talk about a lot of similar things, and we'll like go on retreats to see like other priests and have Q&As and all kinds of things. So we got to have like a lot of what you talked about exactly, which is, it really helped with my faith, and I think a lot of my friends' faith. And almost none of my friends have like left the church thanks to these youth groups. So it's really genuinely such a helpful thing for young people to have this community where they can grow up with these people and bond with them, not just like just being friends, but just like on a deeper spiritual level, and being able to talk about these things. It really, really helped growing up for me personally. So
Well, I suppose
Right,
my something I was going to ask Zachary was like, that's great, but I love to see that. How do you join? Like, let's say someone wants to join, what do they do?
I mean, we do have a Discord server, but it's better, like, so you can join there to see some of the stuff that we are posting. We've also got a Facebook about the posting of events that we're going to do. The best way would be to actually come to those in person. We are nominally open to people from overseas, although we do prefer Australians, as it's focusing on missionary work for Australia. I mean, I can send you guys the details, and you could possibly put them
Put them down
somewhere.
in the bio. Yeah, I'll put them down in the bio of the video.
But we do even have people who are not really following us on any of that stuff, who I just reach out to personally, or they reach out to me, and I invite them along to something that we're doing. It's pretty informal. It's not like we have formal memberships or paid memberships or anything like that. Yeah, and people come and go, sort of like they might want to spend some time and then spend some time, let's say, in a retreat or a monastery, and sort of leave it alone, VOYU for a little bit, and then come back and then go, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's not really all that complicated to join.
Because I remember for some time there was like a New Zealand branch. Do you remember that?
Yes, I
And
do. The bloke who was running that, I don't think is doing it anymore. So because our goal was to have some sort of unity between the states, I mean, we've got people from every state in the group, and they'll meet up sometimes. Long-term goal for me personally, or vision, would be for as many states as possible to have something like this, focusing on the same things we're specifically focusing on. So like distinctives from other youth groups perhaps being the explicit missionary focus, and the focus on perhaps some of the more ascetic things that we don't always get. We'll also do some stuff on philosophy that perhaps we won't have in other youth groups. We're running a Plato reading group at the moment, in fact, because some of that early Greek philosophy is foundational to patristic understanding. So yeah, long term, we're hoping perhaps New Zealand might come back, maybe some of the people from New South Wales and Queensland. I mean, the priest who's heading us is from Queensland, although there's not formally VOYU there. Perhaps eventually.
Well, actually, it's great because lots of the boys our age in New South Wales I actually met in your group. I won't say their real names, but like I'll say their online name, like Chug and these guys. I met them from VOYU. I had no idea who they were before, and then I'm like, oh, actually, he lives like 4 streets away from me. let's hang out
Right.
sometime. So, and there've been meetups in New South Wales even. So I think you can safely say it's affected a lot more than just Melbourne. And what's your kind of setbacks? What's holding you back, do you find?
Um, that's a in-depth question. I'd say probably the biggest thing is it's really hard for, say, like I want to delegate to someone else, something to do. It's hard to find people motivated on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
Because these things require a lot of effort, especially because uh, not to compare, but in a sense we are going a little bit above what a normal youth group would do. There's a bit less at the moment direct like priest organizational interactions. So perhaps for an example, in Goya, is it Greek Orthodox Youth Association?
Yeah, there
Within
is that.
Australia, they have a lot of like, let's say, priest talks. We don't necessarily have access to a lot of priests who are available to do those talks because they already have so many duties. Especially part of that being that they've now had to take on a bit more catechism stuff and shepherding of some of the people who've come in through our group. So most of the role of priest that we have at the moment is pastoral within parishes. We just direct people towards parishes, and so I guess part of our issue might be not having as much direct priest taking on, let's say, a Q&A or a talk. So we haven't really done much in terms of talks or anything like that. Perhaps another issue would be we don't really have much formal structure for like finances and everything. So I think to my understanding, the groups in like the Greek church and the Serbian church have more direct support from the diocese, both in terms of organization and financial and access to venues. So part of the reason why we might be doing Vespers in the park is because we don't have a church building for us to access, which
Yeah.
is hopefully in future we can fix that. And finally, I guess, while there is something to be had with online things, in terms of people from other states, we haven't really, it's far better to have everything in person because obviously online adds a layer of abstraction. It's sort of a little bit dehumanizing in a sense as well. So to be able to, it would be really good, and this is something we want to do in the far future, to have some sort of meetup or conference from various different states. And we're sort of working our way up to that by doing smaller things like we'll be doing boot camps, which we'll do a day liturgical training, some stuff on maybe philosophy, and then a service. So we're doing and also a little bit of physical work. So we're trying to access all parts of that tripartite nature of man. And so we'll work our way up from that to doing bigger organization stuff. I mean, neither myself nor my brother, who helps me run the group, really have any background in any organizational job
Yeah,
or
yeah, of
anything like that.
course. So yeah, like in New South Wales, lots of them, like there's Koi, there's
Yep.
Goya, like you said, there's Akoi, so Antiochian Orthodox Youth,
Yep.
Greek Orthodox Youth. These kinds of things have lots of parish priests come in and give different talks, and it's very much structured by the church hierarchs as opposed to like what you guys are doing. But the issue with that is it kind of caters to people already inside the church and not so much to kind of grab people outside it. So we
Right.
definitely need stuff like VOYU to do that. And I had a look through on the internet. You guys are listed on some university societies, which is great. No,
Yes.
seriously, like
Yes,
that's
we
that's
are.
pretty cool.
Although I think the unit in terms of the university societies, I know at least one of them is dissipating. We haven't actually had that much success with the university societies, probably on account of the fact that I'm a bit lazy. But we'll probably try and get into the universities again at some point, if we can find suitable people. The issue is like a lot of people of the age range in VOYU are either fresh converts or were catechumens. So it wasn't really appropriate to delegate stuff to them at that point, but there might be coming a time when they're sort of ready.
Yeah, well, like this whole, I find some big issue for Orthodoxy in Australia is what you said way back at the start of the episode. It's the fact that there's so many clashing jurisdictions that do, like, let's be honest, are heavily ethnocentric. You can't completely blame the church for that, because if you like want to go back historically, I'd say the Orthodoxy gained some significance here after World War II, when there was like a wave of immigration from places like Greece, Russia, Serbia, and like the Middle East. That's when it was sizable enough that these kind of clashes could even happen. And if you think about it in the greater scheme, what 70 years is not much time at all. So hopefully it's a situation that resolves soon. And what I hope not to be seeing is if I go to like Goya or Akoi and I walk in and I'll be like, okay, at least 1/4 of the people here are not Antiochian or are not Greek, because Orthodoxy is not about that. But what I find is also they clash with each other on a hierarchy level, at least in Australia. So Sky and Mary, how is it for you guys? Because I know there's heaps of jurisdictions there, but the clashing it's actually a harmony. It's diversity. People, it is a benefit rather than a negative in America, from what I have seen. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, where I grew up, there's been, we have like lots of people from many different backgrounds. I mean, where I grew up was kind of unique because we had a Greek Orthodox monastery and a Antiochian mission in the same town. So we had, quite a few Greeks, not like a whole lot, who are just laymen who went to the monastery, and we would go back and forth. And there's like, and people would sometimes go to the monastery for some liturgies, and some people would go to the Antiochian parish. And yeah, we have lots of people of many different ethnicities. So like, I know there's a family that's some that are like African American. There's quite a few from like I think India, or like at least they used to be, and then I think they moved. But yeah, and there's lots of different people from many different backgrounds here, and I've never seen like any conflicts or like clashes, at least where I'm from. But yeah, that's just my experience. What about you, Sky?
So at least in my area, I mean, my parish at least, we try and make a very strong effort to visit all the other parishes regardless of jurisdiction for their name day, and like for their saints day and all that stuff. So like we visited Saint Sophia, we visited Saint Demetrius, we visited Saint Mark, all these different churches. And we try to really make an effort to go out of our way to go visit our brothers in Orthodoxy. And we actually have I know in America we have, I believe it's called the Assembly of Canonical Bishops in America. And it's like, so basically all of our bishops pretty much are in communication with each other. There's a lot of cohesion. And we try and make an effort to really focus a lot on Pan-Orthodoxy here, and really understanding and seeing and visiting all of our Orthodox brothers. Like,
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier to somebody, like, I'm going to visit an OCA church on Wednesday, right? I'll probably go there for liturgy on Sunday. But we always go and visit each other. So it's like,
Yeah. I've visited quite a few parishes in my life, and I've seen lots of bishops from like different jurisdictions, especially for like my monastery's feast day. Here, monastery I'm referring to is St. John the Forerunner here in Washington State. Yeah, we've had like tons of like bishops come from all across different jurisdictions, and it's very beautiful to see like the priests and deacons, readers, and all that interacting together and celebrating beautiful names day of or the feast day of the parish. It's always this like unification. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, and even for like down here for Sunday of Orthodoxy, we all it's not like on an individual parish level. So all the brother clergy all message each other, and we all go to one parish to celebrate the Sunday of Orthodoxy with that parish. And so we start off our Lent and all that, our Lenten season, with celebrating with our brothers at their parishes and stuff like that. And each parish kind of like gets a chance to host the Sunday of Orthodoxy and show it in their tradition and all that. So
That's really cool. Yeah, the priests from my area are very close as well. Like from all the different jurisdictions and parishes and stuff. So like and it's really sweet. My hometown priest, he'll call the monastery, he's the Antiochian priest, but he calls the monasteries Yorandasa, his mama, and his spiritual father, his papa. It's and yeah, it's just such beauty across, just in love for all the our parishes here. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I feel like if we could have more appreciation of other dioceses, that would be a great thing, and it would go a long way here. And a lot of the evangelism effort nowadays, regardless of where you are, is obviously online. So you can get someone hooked online, then you can get them in person. It's shifted a lot. What do you find, Zachary, is the best way that you've found gets people to come to VOYU?
This is a very timely question insofar as we will be starting our more formal evangelism efforts in person next week. So I can't tell you from experience, but we are feeling relatively positive about having a presence within the streets of some suburbs in Melbourne, just having a basically Ask Me Anything stall, as it were, like a table, some chairs. We'll bring our Orthodox study Bible or something like that, and perhaps an icon. And we're hoping that that will bring in more people. Actually, the majority of growth, though, for VOYU would be from reaching me personally, reaching out to as many people as I know and saying, all right, come along, check this out. Which surprisingly worked. I'm not sure how much it would work in other situations, but it could have a bit to do with the kind of friends I make, being, let's say, more interested in intellectual theology. Although we have had, so for instance, one of the newer blokes within our group who is coming along, I sort of just went up and chatted to him in person at a uni sort of stalls thing. And eventually he did readings and stuff all by himself and decided to come along. So I think actually we should be less shy about approaching people in public, especially if they are already sort of displaying that they're Christian. So universities are probably the best place. Unfortunately, I've graduated, so I can't do that anymore. But for anyone who is in university, I'd say when you have an opportunity, let's say there's Christian unions is what it's called here. I don't know what it's called in America, but that's a big one where it's a whole bunch of Protestants, basically. Well, actually, mostly Presbyterians, but it sort of doesn't really matter. And they're pretty serious about their faith. They're pretty serious about investigating Christianity generally. So I think that's a good target demographic. If you just go up and talk, I'd say you have to know a little bit what you're talking about, because otherwise you might turn someone away rather than bring them. So definitely also don't say sort of clown arguments, as it were, against like all these low tier things. They've probably heard about arguments about sola scriptura 1,000 times. You telling them about that is probably not going to make much of a difference. But perhaps if you research into a few things about their history, and if you've had experience with them. So I actually went to a Protestant school, so I've had a lot of experience with them, and I understand a little bit about how they work, how they think. If you can just make connections on a deeper level, discuss maybe some of the stuff you have in common as well, as rather than just debating people on the street. So it should be more of a dialogue as opposed to just a debate. But because no one's really standing around waiting for a debate unless you're in the Areopagus in Greece. So I'd say then, if you want to do stuff in person, it would be best to just have open one-on-one dialogues with people who seem as if they'd be interested. And I find especially that Protestants are generally interested. And then eventually bring them along to like an English service, I guess, if they're open to that. That's been a way we've got most of our converts, and online is sort of more of a consolidation for us as opposed to bringing people in, although we have had some people come in through online.
Yeah, it's great. People forget, that you can meet people in person nowadays, which is a bit ironic. But I find that in different states in Australia, they just have different. It's not like uniform, like this much percent Greek, this much percent Romanian, whatever. It's just dependent on the state and the immigrants that came there, what orthodoxy they brought. Like in Tasmania, they've got Romanian Orthodox churches. That doesn't exist in New South Wales at all. So I think Rokor is something that is missing from New South Wales. How would you say that Melbourne has the most Rokor parishes in Australia?
Victoria, as opposed to Melbourne, might be a better measure, because we have some country churches. I'd say that I haven't looked into it. I'd say it sounds about right. I know we have one in Tasmania. We have some in New South Wales, but I know for sure that there are some in Sydney.
I'm just ignorant.
Strathfield has a Russian Orthodox Church, I think, or that might be Serbian. I'm not sure. But I'm pretty sure that's a Russian church. I might be wrong. Queensland has a couple
down the street from me. But it's not
Okay.
Rokor. It's just Russian Moscow Patriarchate.
Oh, okay, that
continue.
might be the difference then. I'm not 100% sure on which parishes are Moscow and which are Rokor. Either way, though, I think it's not necessarily all too important, because it's the same orthodoxy no matter where you go. At the end of the day. So if there's no Rokor, so be it. I'm not really all too married to just one jurisdiction. I mean, I'm in two regularly every week, so I think my perspective on that might be a bit different to some other people.
Sure. I think the last two formal questions, and then after you can say whatever you want. The last two formal question is, with the Rokor, the way they chant, is it more similar to? Is there any differentiation in how they do that, or is it just the same as you'd find in your regular standard Russian church or Slavic church?
Okay. Rokor churches between each other don't have the same chanting styles. They have the same vague style, and so the main ones that people would sing would be either Kievan style obihod, which is common, or znameny, which is, so a znamen is like a sign. It's sort of like our equivalent to Byzantine chanting, sort of, where they'd have what's called kryuki, which is like crooks, basically, like little signs, sort of how you have over the Byzantine script. That's how Znameni chant originally happened, although most of it's in Western notation now. And that would be pretty much common to Russia as well itself. So in terms of Russia, I mean, I have actually some, let me get a book. If you wanted to learn a little bit about Russian church singing, this and volume 1 are good. My lighting is horrible, so that's not helping. Russian church singing volumes 1 and 2 by Johann von Gardner, and so he was a bishop, I think, translated by Vladimir Morozin, who is a big name in the USA, at least in the musical community.
How do you spell his name?
Johann von Gardner is the author, and if you just it's Russian church singing volumes 1 and 2. So those are really good books if you're interested in sort of all those differences. There's 6 main canonical quote unquote styles, although we do sing stuff that's para-canonical, I think. So essentially, like, we'll sing stuff from Rachmaninoff is the one that perhaps everyone might know, although we wouldn't really sing that regularly. Stuff from Archangelsky is a big composer name. Personally, actually myself though, I'm a little bit I like all the chanting traditions. So whenever I can, I'll try and incorporate, let's say, a bit of Byzantine as well as I'm able. I'm actually learning that as best as I can now. Serbian, Russian, Gregorian, which is interesting. There's an Orthodox site, I think it's called. Let's have a look. Orthodox hymns in the Gregorian chant. Not quite. Here we go. I'll put a link. So they've set out some music in the Gregorian style, which is the historical Western tradition. That is actually develops out of the same roots as the Byzantine. That file goes into detail on that. I actually haven't learnt any Arab styles. I would like to. I had a go at looking at the Arab alphabet, and I'm not very good at it. So maybe that's a project for later once I've learnt some more things. And I think looking at the Armenian traditions and things like that could also be good because they have some really nice things there. Georgian is very different. In fact, from recollection, they flip the triad. So like instead of having your sort of bass note on the tonic, let's say, you might have it on the 5th, like where you're just staying the same. So Georgian is very interesting as well. This is a bit of a tangent to what you asked, but I am pretty interested in singing and liturgics as an interest of mine. So felt like discussing all those styles. So I think if we gain appreciation for all that stuff, that'd be really good. Part of my thinking as well, eventually it would be great if we had some native Australians produce music in a sort of something that reflects our cultural conscience. The issue is it's very difficult because our cultural conscience isn't as unified as in, let's say, Russia in the 12th century or 13th century. So it's going to be interesting to see if anything ever organically develops there. I know that you do music yourself as well, so you might be interested in that. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the mention of developing our own style. I think in America we have some of our own stuff. I know for sure we have an Appalachian version of Christ is Risen here. I think that's Appalachian is a musical style here in the US. And yeah, I'm a chanter as well, so I really enjoy all those different types, like learning about all those different types of chants and like all those traditions. I first went to a Rokor, and for the first time in years, a few years ago, I was like blown away by just how different the chanting is compared to Byzantine chant, which is what I'm used to. So yeah, it's very interesting. I also want to learn more about Georgian chant because that's just gorgeous.
I think with the Byzantine style, and we're on a wild tangent now, so cut me off if you want. But something that I think is important is for people to make sure that we're not, oh, we can only sing in the holy Byzantine style, everything else is a heresy,
Yeah.
or the holy nominee style.
Yeah.
Those Westerners with their polyphonic music are demonic. That kind of attitude I think is silly within singing, but I know people will disagree with that as well.
People will disagree with anything, right?
Yeah.
What's the merit? What's the merit of what they're actually saying? What was the last question I was going to ask? It's like it was on the tip of my tongue. I'm just trying to think. No, I can't remember it. Is there anything that you wanted to kind of bring up that you feel like I didn't get into enough?
So I'm actually a bit curious because perhaps our American friends haven't spoken too much, especially Skyology. I would like to hear about your perspectives on mission within your country as opposed to what you perceive mission to be like in Australia. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit.
Well, like, what do you mean? Like, how do I perceive what the mission, like a mission environment would
Like
be like in
missionary
Australia?
work. Like, are you
Do you
asking
think
about?
it's going well in America?
Oh, I think it's going fantastic
Oh,
here.
yeah, yeah.
I
My
mean, I
hometown
see.
parish.
Yeah, I was gonna say I see. We have like, I think maybe over 10 catechumens at my parish, and we're like a pretty small parish. I mean, compared to other parishes. But it's like, yeah, I mean, we're constantly getting a flood of catechumens coming in, new guys, new females coming in as well, like new female catechumens as well. A lot of guys though, so I feel like it's definitely growing here at least, and I hear that from a lot of the other parishes that we visit. A lot of them have new catechumens. A lot of them are
Yeah.
doing constant catechumen classes now because I feel like, because especially online, it's getting more and more researched through various Orthodox creators and stuff like that, and a lot of the outreach is very strong for Orthodoxy online in America. So, and a lot of I feel like there's a desire for truth here. There's like a hunger. There's a hunger for that for the truth that can only be found in the church and Orthodoxy and all that. And people will, when they're ready, when their hearts are ready, be led to the truth. So yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah,
Before you
my
say, Mary, can I ask as
sorry.
well, can we have this from a specifically female perspective? Because we have a lot of young blokes coming in, but
Yeah, that's true.
I know a gripe of some people in Australia here is the lack of females coming in. So if I can add that onto my question specifically for you.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few uh female catechumens. One of my friends actually is going to be baptized in a month from, like, yeah, actually just about a month from now. Yeah, and I have a lot of friends in my hometown, like whole entire families getting baptized together, and there are lots of girls there. And I think what's really important is giving the ladies their own kind of space, and like being able to learn more about female saints and femininity, like in Christianity, and really having their own space, because like guys usually take over the youth groups or have their own kind of things going on. My friends will like go have like retreats together, like all the guys go on hikes, do like all night visuals on a hike in the middle of the mountains, I don't know, in the middle of nowhere. And but sometimes the girls don't really have that, so I think it's really important for the female catechumens and inquires to not feel left out. Like so like my hometown, they'll do ladies night, where it's just all the moms and the young girls and all that come together and just have like time to bond and talk about orthodoxy together in like their own space. Or even like go together to the monastery. Like the monastery in my hometown is a women's monastery, so that really helped a lot of the young ladies, really see, genuinely true Orthodox femininity from those nuns. And yeah, it's for us ladies, having our own space, I think is really important, giving girls their own like space to talk. Because like I said, guys tend to take over quite easily. So
Thank you.
yeah. And
Did
I
you
know
happen to
we've
remember your
been-
question?
Sorry?
Oh, did Haiti happen to remember his question?
No, I haven't been able to remember it. I'm sorry, it's just
Oh.
completely.
Okay, I have nothing else unless someone else does.
Unless I remember the question.
So
Okay.
now I have a question. Do you is the future bright for Orthodoxy in Australia? That's my question for you. Do you think the future is bright? Do you think there's a lot of potential?
There's definitely a lot of potential. Is it likely to be actualized? My perspectives change based on how things are going, but I think it is possible, but it might take more time than in America for us to have a really strong Orthodox community. I think Australians can be a bit more apathetic perhaps than Americans, like she'll be right, that kind of thing. But something interesting is insofar as American, let's say, politics influence our politics, American culture influences our culture. Perhaps some of what we might need is for you guys to lead the way, or not that that precludes us doing our own thing, but that could possibly even really help. There is a link that's pretty strong between the culture in Australia, following aspects of the culture in America, which unfortunately has been pretty bad in the past. Like we've picked up a lot of your consumer culture ourselves. Not to bag out Americans, but that's a issue that is now across the entire West. But that's something I think we picked up from you guys. We've also picked up some of the sports culture and all of that. But I think, yeah, it should be possible. It's possible that, and of course, with God, all things are possible. But I think there's definitely strong potential and decent probability of something strong occurring within Orthodoxy in Australia.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I think Australia has heaps of potential. Our main issue is everyone wants to come to New South Wales, Sydney, and it's like overpopulated there, and wants to just spread out a little bit.
So when is Australia getting its own patriarchate? What's going on? Like, you got...
That's
a long time coming, but hopefully sometime eventually. Well, I want to say a massive thank you to Zach for coming on from VOYU. Make sure to check out the links we're going to put below. Join his server. If you're in Melbourne, go check out VOYU. And that's Australian Orthodoxy in a nutshell for you guys. Thanks for watching, and thank you, Zachary, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.